Welcome to the Advancing Entrepreneur. This show is all about surrounding yourself for success. Hear stories of building traction, gaining acceleration, and creating results from successful entrepreneurs who have surrounded themselves with other successful entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Annette Nightingale James.
Hello, Advancing Entrepreneurs. Annette James here with the Advancing Entrepreneur Show. And today we have one of my mastermind buddies on as one of our guests today. I'd like to welcome to the show Bill Heid. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Annette. How are you?
Very good. How are you? I think it's actually afternoon, but I think that the audience is going to have to roll with me on that because I'm still drinking my coffee for the day. So I haven't shifted into afternoon yet.
It's 12:04 here, so technically afternoon, but I know some people are just waking up. So.
Exactly. So very good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Bill Heid is the founder of Off the Grid News, president of Solutions from Science, and is currently the executive producer of In Freedom's Cause. Bill, say hi to our audience. Tell us a little bit more about you and some of the projects you're working on.
Well, thanks for having me, Annette. It's great to be with you, great to talk to your audience because I am one of you. And I'm kind of a Napoleon Hill guy from years and years and years ago. So this whole idea of masterminding, mentoring, bringing outside information into your brain is something that's probably shaped my life as much or more than anything else that I know. So it's great to be with you and talk about it because it is important, I think, to avail ourselves to other people. I think that's what God hardwired us in this certain way that we are open to information for other individuals. And I think if we're humble and we can receive that information, that's a stopping point to a lot of people, right? Is not being having the personality to kind of take criticism or take other information in. But I think it's really it's a great necessity if you want to be successful.
I think you're so right. I love that too. You know, the group the audience that we're speaking to today, that we've been talking to over the last, 3 or 4 weeks, I've been really harping on surrounding yourself with entrepreneurs. Now, my favorite way to do that is through mastermind groups, but I think you brought up such a good point. You can always kind of tell the person in the group who's like a little resistant to that, right? Who's not willing. You do have to open yourself up to criticism, and you have to recognize that we can't see everything within our own purview. So if you're out there listening right now and you're thinking about joining a mastermind group, Bill is backing me up here and telling you that the best way to get the most out of the mastermind group is to be willing to take the feedback, and realize that you're going to be much better for it. So very good. Well, Bill, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No, I was going to make a point about that I think is important for entrepreneurs to develop and cultivate what you don't want among your employees. So what I'm thinking, you're kind of talking about something maybe that runs both vertically and horizontally, because I really believe that if you have, we all know that we need to have our peers, other business owners. That's why I'm in Peak. That's why I love the Kennedy stuff and Lee Miltier, because I think we all need to, as entrepreneurs, sort of talk sideways with people that perhaps know a lot more about something than you do. But I think it's equally important to make a mastermind out of your employees. And so for me, part of it's just cultivating a sense of openness whereby people can say what's really on their mind. We all know personality types who are very strong. And if you've got a strong kind of a barrier around you, these kind of bombastic, both men and women, folks are afraid to kind of say in mastermind. So I think this idea of masterminding for me, if you're going to operate on high voltage with it, you're going to want harmony, and harmony is only going to be created. That was one of the Napoleon Hill's big deals, right? And you go to create a mastermind group, especially, what do you want? You want to know what your purpose is. That's huge. But then you want to make sure that the people that are around you, there's perfect harmony. So I found, I'm 56 years old. I've been a businessman since I was 8 years old. I used to have a lawn mowing service when I was a kid. So I've really found that you can learn from everybody, but you can also push people away. And it's just important to get everybody's perspective, because sometimes the lowest guy in your office or in your factory can come up with an idea that, if you're looking for it, can be extremely valuable to it. So I'm an idea guy. I'm always looking for ideas. I'm always looking to make things better. And I write a lot of copy. I mentioned that Gary Halbert was my mentor, and we did a lot of brainstorming. So it's humbling in business because one fails a lot, and a lot of it's like baseball, right? You're swinging, you don't hit every pitch. In copy, you strike out once in a while, and sometimes it's great to read. Let me tell you what Halbert used to do, and for those that have maybe that know Gary, you would know this, but Gary would do a form of masterminding that's very different than what the structured masterminding and that we're talking about. Gary would take his copy, he would go to a bar in Ohio, back when he lived in Ohio, and he would read his letter aloud, his sales letter, masterminding with people who are his potential customers. So I'm kind of throwing a bunch of stuff at you. You're masterminding with peers, other entrepreneurs. You're masterminding, of course, with your employees, and you're cultivating a sense of openness and harmony there. Then Gary would go take his letters, and after people had a few beers, he'd read the letter to them, and he would kind of mastermind with people in that venue. A lot of times he'd read the letter, and if he knew if someone said to him, "Hey, Gary, that was a great sales letter. You're really going to do well with that one." He knew his sales letter was terrible. But if they said to him when he was done, "Hey, where can I get that?" then he knew he had a winner. Sometimes when you mastermind, you have to be careful of masterminding with people, your peers, because many times your peers aren't your market. So what I'm advocating is a kind of a three-dimensional masterminding, whereby you're taking in information from your peers, of course, other entrepreneurs, your employees, and then if you can figure out a way to do it with your customers as well. And so if you do all those things and you have an open mind, I think you create the conditions for great ideas. And then if you're able to implement those ideas, so much the better.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, because we talked about the whole idea is to don't live in a bubble. So you can live in a bubble with other entrepreneurs just as much as you can live in a bubble in your own mind. So I love that so much. So you mentioned a few minutes ago that when you're writing copy, when you're running a business, sometimes you hit those walls. Sometimes you have those strike and a miss, right? A swing and a miss. So tell us, what kind of juices you up? What keeps you going when you're kind of having a bad day, or a project isn't coming together the way? What gets you moving and keeps you focused on your business every day?
Well, that's a great question. And really, as I think about it, I have a lot of things that I've learned from Gary Halbert. One of the things that I've learned is you got to getting outside once in a while is amazing. So I like to hunt and fish and stuff. And so for me, just getting outside, and you'd be amazed at how profitable moving away from a project can be. And Michael Jordan used to always play golf in the summertime just because it was a tool for him to move away from basketball. So I think you got to move away from things in order to come back to things. I think we all need triggers to keep us motivated. That's a really important thing. One of the things in the house I'm here right now, one time Gary was here and he left his bandana. He used to wear a bandana all the time, so he didn't like the fact that he was losing his hair. So I have that bandana. Sometimes when I get into a bit of a pinch in that, I put Gary's bandana on and I walk around the house. I know you're going to think I'm nuts when I tell you this, but I walk around the house and I kind of just think about when Gary used to come here and I used to go down to his apartment and we used to talk and brainstorm. And I kind of do this, like Napoleon Hill would do this too. I kind of just in my mind kind of play out a conversation, and I pump myself up just thinking about trying to get my stuff done. What happens to me often is I have kind of a Dan Kennedy perspective that he used to do back in the old days. He would go in the mornings and run his business, and then he would go back in the afternoon and do his copywriting. I go in the morning, run my business, but I get my head full of crazy stuff. And I'm sure all of the people that are watching this, there's just so many problems that you're trying to repair. You have to create little buffer zones between you and all those problems. So I come back from my business, I have 45 employees, and it's crazy stuff. Every little thing, there's decisions about There's a water leak someplace, this or that. There's a bird got in this place. Somebody's not here. What's our social media plan for that day? But that's not conducive to writing copy. When you're writing copy, you really aren't as linear as you are when you're trying to conduct the organizational structure of your business. So how do you cross hemispheres in your brain, right? That's really kind of what you're doing. And I do it through humor. I do it through getting out of the house. I do it through sometimes just moving away from the project that I'm trying to do. So I have a number of tools and triggers. I think that having and knowing what your own psychological triggers are is a pretty important, know thyself, right? Because if you keep making the mistakes over and over and over about, I have these problems, but I can't get myself in the right modality mentally to accomplish what I have to accomplish, then learn from the past. And, what's the definition of craziness or insanity? Is doing the same thing over and over and over. So you got to know yourself, and you got to know what, is it your wife that drives you crazy, your husband? Do you need to work here? Is it your environment? Is there a place you can go? Yeah, because you have to know all those things. Let me throw a comment in here because I agree with Napoleon Hill when he talks about having your wife or husband being in harmony with you. Probably one of the most detrimental things to the life of an entrepreneur is having a spouse that's rowing the boat in another direction. So harmony there probably, and whatever it is you have to do to attain harmony there, you'd be surprised at what type of creativity comes from just getting that foundational structure down first. And then, almost like an inner circle, you get yourself ready, you get your family ready, you move out into the community and your business and so forth. So I think having a philosophy of these things and just knowing that how you think about things is important, and just being self-aware that you are an entrepreneur, that there's all these things being thrown at you every day is pretty helpful. One of the things that we do a lot, like I just did a radio show. We've got a radio show on Off the Grid News, and we were talking about our product you mentioned at the beginning in Freedom's Cause. And in Freedom's Cause is a audio drama production where instead of a movie, I went and got some great actors, James Cosmo who's in Braveheart, Joanne Froggatt from Downton Abbey is in it, Skandar Keynes, who is in Chronicles of Narnia, is in it. Billy Boyd is in my latest production too, from Lord of the Rings. So my point about when you tackle a project as big as that, we got to write scripts and we have to do things like that. That's the ultimate sort of masterminding, because you've got a time frame. It's not open. You've got a sequence of times when things need to get done. So you really have to, what the technique that I use there is a lot of times I'll use my assistant, Hannah, to kind of help create some structure in how we do mastermindings when we write scripts, because you've got a lot of factors when you write a script. You got historical issues. You got, is this true to the narrative of the story you're trying to represent? How am I going to use an actor once I get in the studio? How's that going to sound? All those things require masterminding, kind of on, a mastermind high alert is what I'll call it, because a mistake there can really cost you in an investment as large as what we put into these productions could really be a big mistake. So I've tried to use all the formulas that I described to make that come alive. And I'll throw one thing in too that I think maybe is a little bit different than Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill would want positive thinkers, and I think you do have to have people that are positive around you. No one wants to be drugged down by a spouse, employee, or another entrepreneur that tells you that things are always terrible. However, if you do have thick enough skin, which all entrepreneurs ought to be able to figure out a way to develop, thick skin, you need to have some naysayers on your team. You need to have some grumpy people on your team, and you need to have some people that stop you and challenge you and say no. So one of Napoleon Hill's things was positive mental attitude, and I think that's true. But I'd throw another factor in there. I think you want people on your team that are negative. They tell you no.
Are you kind of
So
are you looking for somebody to kind of punch holes in the idea instead of everything being daisies and roses? You want somebody that can kind of be maybe the devil's advocate, if you will, and come in and say, well, what about this or what about that? Is that kind of the benefit that you find of having some people that will give you an opposite viewpoint?
I do, and I think it's really necessary. I'm a Christian, so I'm going to use Christian parlance when I talk, and I think the Bible says that there's wisdom in many counselors, and that's just something that's time honored. My guess is probably other religions have something similar to that too, Annette, but I just think being humble enough, and it really starts there, doesn't it? You've got to be humble enough to be able to receive a criticism, or in Bible sense, a rebuke, right? If you're a smart person, you're going to receive a rebuke. Somebody's going to say to you, "Hey, wait a second, that you're heading the wrong direction." A lot of entrepreneurs, and the problem with that is a lot of entrepreneurs, they develop thick skin, and that skin gets so thick that their momentum, they won't listen to anybody else. So it's almost like Martin Luther in the old days would talk about a drunk getting up on a horse, and he would get up and he would fall off the horse on one side, and then he'd, being drunk, get up and he'd fall off the horse on the other side. So it's really a good metaphor for entrepreneurism, because it is a bit of a fragile walk. You've got to receive criticism, but that criticism can't kill you. I know a lot of people that when they're starting a project, they brainstorm. If I brainstorm with them and I play the devil's advocate, as you say, and I just throw out something that I think is very real. It's like a dagger, right? It wasn't never my intention, but it ends up being something that creates this a big cataclysm, instead of just somebody saying, "Wow, I wonder how I can take that adversity and turn it into something that's an opportunity," which is
You
what
have
entrepreneurs
to
have to learn how to.
your ideas have to be able to withstand poking some holes in them, right? Or they're really not going to go anywhere, So there's that, and there's also the time I think as entrepreneurs when somebody is giving us advice opposite, or we feel like they're trying to poke holes. We have to be careful about being too like, oh, you're just being negative. It can also be take that feedback and evaluate it. And okay, is this something I need to incorporate? Is this something that I need to take? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes it's no. But if you're just going to roll out ideas and you're only going to surround yourself with fluffy clouds and rainbows, then if you're going to, the market is going to give you a lot of feedback if you weren't open to it before. So very good.
Yeah, plan's going to.
Go ahead.
No, and I was just thinking of Richard Branson, as great an entrepreneur as he is, and we had that plane crash. I wonder if that plane crash didn't come from the one side where we're so positive and optimistic about, I'm such a dreamer. That's who Richard is, and that's what's made him successful. And he's a great entrepreneur, greater than I am. But I wonder if that's what caused that crash. Dreaming too big, not listening to people who were saying, "Hey, wait a second, we should slow down a little bit." And it really can cause a lot of problems.
Getting a variety of perspectives is important. Well, Bill, tell us, before you started to surrounding yourself with other entrepreneurs, so if we go back to focusing on that as the definition of mastermind for the purposes of the conversation, was there a time in your business before you started going to live events or you started participating in mastermind groups? Was there a point when you kind of came to that moment in time when you're like, I can't continue to hold this up on my own. I need to surround myself with some feedback and maybe just even, stepping away, like you're good at stepping away from the business and going to a conferences. Was there any kind of particular turning point for you or moment in time when you were like, oh, I'm gonna have to reach outside myself for this one?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because as a business person who's failed a lot, I've had my hits, and I've had my losses, but you'd be surprised how many times I've had to do that, right? So it's not just, you just do it once, it's like going to church. People, they go down to a Billy Graham thing and they get saved, they ask forgiveness, they do that once. And I'm one of those guys that needs to say, I'm sorry every day. I'm one of those guys that needs to kind of have these epiphanies, these discoveries every day. I go through a crisis once a week just because I live in a very fast-paced world. And so the truth of it is, I've said that a lot, but if I could narrow down one thing lately, a friend of mine said to me, really candidly, he said, are you the smartest person in the room at your office? And I said, I don't know if you're talking about IQ, but probably business acumen. Yes. And then he said, then you need to avail yourself to other people, other groups, other conversations, because there's a lot of other ways to get things done rather than just the way you know how to do them. So, and my employees, while they are open, kind of want to do the things the way that I see to do them. But going to an event, listening to other people, really opens up possibilities that stagger the imagination. In fact, I just got back from St. Louis, and I had so many notes and so many ideas that I'm almost sad because I can't implement them as fast as I want to do them. So beware there too, right? Know yourself with respect to once you get done masterminding. I've seen this happen a lot too, as long as we're talking about, the pluses and minuses. You go to an event or you get a bunch of people and you have to almost put a governor on yourself with respect to what you think you're going to take from that. It's almost like going to a bar and saying, I'm only going to have 2 drinks. Writing all the things down, but maybe circling 1 or 2, because you want to always write everything down. I think that's helpful. But then just saying, what are the ultimacies? What are the priorities? What can help me get something done right away? Circle that and kind of leave the other ones alone, or you'll go nuts because your peers will give you a lot of ideas and you simply can't act on all those ideas. I'm sure that's happened to you as well. You do a lot of masterminding and man, you get ideas and you go, whoa, you almost need to go take a nap when you're done.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. So you can get a lot of ideas, but it's usually just you needed one in that time. And I used to have a coach that would tell us, whenever you get a new idea, just have a dedicated journal for ideas. And then if you're ever kind of feeling low on creativity or you're like, oh, I need to do something new, you can go back and pull out that journal at that time. But if you try to implement too many things, you're just going to scatter yourself and nothing's going to get done. And then you're subject to tell yourself, oh, see, it doesn't work. See, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
Nothing's getting done.
Yeah, a lot of wars. Let me throw another point because I think this is you touched on something. Military. We'll call this a mastermind group, right? You and I are masterminding in that sense. If you look, I like not just masterminding with other people, but I like masterminding with historical events and authors from a different time. If you go look at history, you look at military history. What happens to generals like Napoleon, Hitler, who try to fight a war on too many fronts? It never works. We left Vietnam because of supply line issues, because we couldn't fight a war that took that much supply line effort. So, how many fronts are you fighting your entrepreneurial war on? What's your supply line tactics and strategy? What kind of support structure do you have to implement? I think you can mastermind, go back in time, learn from battles, learn from classic business biographies from great business people. There's so many different ways to mastermind that it almost and I think for one to really be successful in some sense too, mixing these ideas up. I know people that go to conferences all the time. They're conference junkies. And sometimes it makes me wonder, why do I see that guy? And then I talk to him and it's like, he signs up for every conference there is. And that's a lot, to take in and then actually implement. So another Bible verse that says, hope long delayed makes the heart sick. Hope long delayed makes the heart sick.
Planning, ready, aim, and never firing can, be very frustrating.
It's going to have a psychological effect on you, and it's going to flatten out the dynamic presence that you could have if you get energized on a project.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you mastermind in a lot of different ways, and you've been to a lot. You've been to several conferences, and we obviously sit in a mastermind group together. But if you could take one a hot seat moment, one aha moment, maybe it was an accountability call, maybe it was within a mastermind within your company, and your employees said something that you could point to and share with us as maybe some kind of turning point. Can you think of a story that was kind of an aha moment for you when you were like, oh, this is pivotal for me right now.
Yeah, but it seems kind of crazy because it was I was down in Miami working with Gary Halbert on a project, and uh, we were thinking about it and trying too hard, and we decided we'd go to a movie. So Gary and I went to a movie and totally erased all the effort. And when we were walking out of the theater on the way to the car, Gary gave me a headline that was $1 million headline. So, you know, so it was a lot of hard work and sitting there grinding and kind of being grumpy and mad that we weren't getting anywhere. And then etch a sketching our brains with a movie. I think it was a Mission Impossible movie, actually. And then just having something come to you. You hear these things happen, and that's something that happened to me. Wasn't at a big conference, but that's just something that I can think of that just popped out like these. I was showering and I got this idea. You hear a lot of those stories too. Well, I guess you can walk out of a Tom Cruise movie and come up with a great headline because we did it.
So, audience, takeaway: go watch a Tom Cruise movie this afternoon. $1 million headline to follow minutes after. So, no, I actually really like that because I got to tell you, there's been a theme recurring with the guests that I've been interviewing. There's actually quite a few people that have had their aha moment not in the hot seat, not face to face, not at a round table, but when they quieted their mind or when they were in their hotel room at night or whatever. And the lesson that is continuing to resurface is it's not always about exactly when, but it's about putting yourself in that space for it to happen in the first place. So if you hadn't been there working with Gary, investing in yourself and your business in that way, that headline might have never, come to you. So it was the fact that you made it possible for it to show itself is where you got it from. So I like it. I don't think it's crazy. I like it. So, well, tell us what are you working on now? Kind of tell us where's your business gone since you discovered masterminding and started implementing it, and what have been some of the highlights? And again, whatever projects you've got going on now, we'd love to hear about it.
Sure. Like I said earlier, we have a lot of things going on in our business. Probably the business thing, biggest business thing we got going right now is our In Freedom's cause. We've got these big actors, and it's one of those situations where I kind of reached out and did something a little different with respect to product creation. So last time we were at Peak, the idea was create an info product. Well, I've got an info product, but it's a little different kind of info product because it's designed to teach you about history, and it's designed to kind of inspire children and teach kids about responsibility, teach kids that freedom isn't free, that there's always a cost. The stories about William Wallace. And as I said earlier, I think the main thing there, the takeaway is when you go to write these scripts, when you're working, here's another little example that happened to me. Well, actually it happens quite frequently. I could be in the studio and masterminding and idea exchange and just the freedom to be able to change on the fly because you've got that kind of personality. And as you said earlier, because you've created the conditions, like going to a movie, you're jamming yourself with stuff and then lightening up and letting things just, are you ready for what's going to happen next? You kind of lighten yourself up. Well, we were in the studio in London, and one of our actors, and I think it was Jimmy Cosmo, who was in Braveheart, we had a script, and he wanted to say, let me give you this take. Let me give you another take. So just the idea of a bunch of us in the studio watching a famous actor, working with him, and then having some back and forth where you're open to hearing what they have to say. I think that's been a real epiphany for me, because I've learned something with respect to actors, and entrepreneurs are similar. The higher, the better quality actor you have, the more likely that actor is to be working in harmony with you, to really getting the spot, to really being in the moment, and really trying to help you with your purpose. So I've discovered that. That's a huge discovery for me. And so now when I go into the studio, I'm thinking a little differently. I'm not as rigid about a way a script has to be, very open to what especially if you really have your life and your craft is movies and acting. And I'm kind of a junior, kind of on the upside. This as a young producer, not in age but in experience. So again, it helps to be humble. It helps to have a spirit of just receiving and living in the moment and kind of being playful.
So I like it. I like it. I like what you said too about kind of changing your thinking a little bit on it. I think, as entrepreneurs or actors are the same way, apparently, if you are not noticing a marked change in your thinking over time, you're stagnant in some areas. So we should constantly be looking for that evolution in our thinking. I think that's really important. That's where books come in really helpful, in conferences as well. So, Bill, we're kind of winding down here a little bit. So I want to give our audience a chance to get to know you just a little bit more. So we're going to do a little bit of a speed round here called Playing Favorites, okay? So tell us, what is your favorite charity?
We've got an orphanage in Haiti that we sponsor. And we produce solar. We produce off-the-grid solar stuff, and so we're working to help to take this technology into some very remote areas and provide electricity for people that don't have electricity.
So I love it. I love it. What is your favorite quote?
Oh boy, my favorite quote. I think I was thinking about two quotes today, and they're just like Luther. They're kind of cheap and short, but I was thinking about the mistakes that I've made, and I think really, as goofy as it sounds, I've messed up by hesitating. So he who hesitates is lost is pretty important. And believe it or not, I'm going to co-put in there, look before you leap. They don't sound like they can synchronize with each other, and they're not big and grandiose, and I'm not going to quote Goethe or any poet or anything, but I think those two things for me, I was just reflecting on a few minutes ago.
I love it. I love it. I think those are very good for entrepreneurs, both of them. So we have to balance it, right? Entrepreneur life is about balancing due diligence with just getting started and different things like that. So I think that those are very appropriate. What is your favorite app or resource that you use in our business that you think our audience might like to check out?
Here's my favorite resource. I'm old school.
If you are only listening to the audio of this, Bill just held up his pen, okay? Just a pen and paper.
I'm going to hold up another, most people don't know about. It's a piece of paper, and I use both of these things together and have for a long time. I think
they go together. I get it now.
Yeah, I use those together. And listen, Kennedy thinks he's a big shot because he uses the facts. So let me say this. Let me make this perfectly clear, as Richard Nixon used to say. I don't even have a fax machine, Dan. Ta-da. I got a pen and paper. I have a staff, though, that uses a lot of tools and computers and stuff that because I'm a conceptualizer and because I write copy and because I'm interested in main ideas, I don't want to learn how to use them. So I'm one of those guys, a little bit like Dan, saying, I like the division of labor. You young guys, you master this stuff. I'll rely on you and let me do what I do best. And I still, like Gary Halbert, I still write my letters with a pen and on a legal pad. So I'm on a plane, I've got a legal pad and I'm writing copy. People think everybody else has got a computer and all this stuff, and I got a legal pad and a pen.
So, good enough. Sticking to your genius, right? Not getting distracted with all the different ways that could be done, but sticking to the way that works for you. Very good. Bill, what is your favorite song?
Oh, gee. My favorite song. You really put me on the spot. I'm going to probably say Amazing Grace, because I think Amazing Grace summarizes what I've been kind of throwing into this, leavening this conversation. I think if you think that you know it all, if you think that you know everything and you can do everything, I think that really what makes a mastermind or an entrepreneur successful or potentially successful is just being in a frame where you're humble enough to know that you ain't God and that you're created and that other people are equal with you and you can take information with them joyously. So I know that's a long answer, but I think grace is an operative word, probably the most interesting word in the universe, probably the currency of the universe that I think really powers a great business. It powers a great relationship at home, anywhere. So Amazing Grace.
I like it. And what is this is the last one, I promise, what is your favorite business book?
Um, you know, lately I've been reading Gene Schwartz's breakthrough advertising book. I know that seems odd, but let me say why I think that is so genius that most people miss. And I'll tell you something about my friend Gary Halbert that Gary missed. There's a life to products. Gary and a lot of other copywriters, as kind of, hired gunmen, come in and analyze you existentially, and they look at what situation there is. And someone's going to write $1 million ad about that. What Schwartz was a genius at thinking about was everything it's almost back to Ecclesiastes, there's a season for everything. And so there's a product bell curve for things. There's a business bell curve. And knowing that the ad that you run when a product is new isn't the ad that you run during a time when there's more awareness of your product, and being able to switch and understanding that. And I think Gene Schwartz was a genius, and I think breakthrough advertising. I just met the guy, some of the guys from Boardroom, and Brian Kurtz was there at the last Kennedy thing, and Brian, his mentor, talking about mentors, his mentor put that book back into circulation again, and it belongs on every businessman's shelf or businesswoman's shelf.
Awesome. And if our audience wants to go to our website at iamadvancing.com, we'll go ahead and grab the link to that book and post it right on Bill's show notes page. All you have to do is type Bill into the search bar. The show notes page will come right up, along with the link to the resources that we've been talking about today. We might even link to a box of pens that you can buy. So, Bill, I want you to share one piece of advice that you, as yourself today, would give to yourself as a beginning entrepreneur, maybe even the 8-year-old lawnmower. What piece of advice would you share with yourself back then? Then I want you to tell our audience where they can connect to and find with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Certainly. I think the greatest piece of advice is something that Winston Churchill echoed in that great speech that he had during the war, and that is, you never surrender. Never, never, never surrender. And if you have a dream and you want to live that dream, if you've got a great idea and you'd like to make sure that that idea, you're going to have bumps. Listen, you'd be a fool to think that you're going to go from point A to point B without a bunch of problems. The universe is just not wired that way. So expect problems, and when the world beats you down with a stick, which it's going to, you got to take a break, go to a movie with Gary, whatever your equivalent of that is.
Tom Cruise movie with Gary.
Get back on your feet and continue on, because you're going to fail. And if you have such a view of yourself that's so big that you can't allow yourself to fail, if you're so egocentric that you can't fail, you are going to fail. So that's a kind of an interesting paradigm, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think when you were sharing about the businesses that you've had when we first got on the call, it reminded me of a book by John Maxwell called Failing Forward. And they were studying, like super successful entrepreneurs. And it was like, I want to say it was either 12 or 15 businesses is how many businesses that the millionaires or the multimillionaires went through before they found the one business that really took off. 12 to 15, that number has stuck with me for years. I reread that book about every other year or so too, because it is essential. He says you should either be up or getting up. So never stay down. So I love it. Bill, tell our audience where they can find you. And again, we will link to that on your show notes page on the website.
Probably the best way to connect. I'm not easy. I'm like Dan again. I'm kind of difficult to connect with because I'm off the grid on a farm right now. Don't have my solar switched on right now, but I can go to all of that when I need to. But probably the best way to reach me is to go to our Solutions from Science page, or you know what better would be to go to offthegridnews.com, offthegridnews.com, and just go to the info email, the contact info, and just say message for Bill, and one of my assistants or whatever will make that known to me, and I can get back to someone that needs to talk to me.
Perfect. So again, go to IamAdvancing.com, hit Bill up in the search bar. His show notes page will come up, and we'll link to all these resources and everything. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to help our entrepreneurs advance.
Thank you for having me, Annette. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Advancing Entrepreneur. If you enjoyed it, leave us a rating and review. Not only will it make our day, you'll also be helping others find this show and advance their own careers. Once you're done, be sure to head on over to IamAdvancing.com and join our community to learn what it takes to be an advancing entrepreneur and surround yourself for success. Thanks again, and get ready to advance.